Does everything feel like it's your fault? Stay to the end, where I teach you 3 ways to unhook from feeling like everything is your fault. If you ever grew up feeling like everything was your fault, even if it wasn't, you're not alone. But that invisible weight that you're carrying is costing you peace, your relationship, and your confidence as an adult. In this video, I'm breaking down why that guilt got wired into you in the first place and show you 3 powerful ways to unhook for good. Hi, I'm Sandy. Ever feel like every mistake, every broken relationship, every setback is somehow your fault? Maybe you grew up in a household where blame wasn't fair. And now as an adult, that same guilt is showing up as anxiety, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. Sometimes you don't even know it. I didn't. You were taught to carry a weight that was never yours. So I want to share with you a little story, real life example of why I'm so passionate about sharing this. So recently I had some plumbing done. I have several videos. One's right here this is the start of the plumbing saga or the plumbing education. What I've learned from that's the start of it. And I love the fact that in there, I mentioned that I'm probably going to make a million mistakes. And I did. Maybe not a million, but anyway, it was interesting to me how the company that I had do the plumbing work, were a reputable company and they were pretty pricey. So I thought that for sure that would limit any problems, issues, all that. Well, they had a policy to not change I had the main line from the main line to my refrigerator icebox thing. I had that all redone. That was redone for many reasons. But so they had a policy that I was told in passing that they don't change the line from the shutoff valve to the refrigerator. That was the only thing that they didn't touch. That was the only thing that broke. So when I found it days later, I think it actually happened right away, but it was so minor that no one noticed it, really. I did notice a wet spot the next day and they were there for 2 days, but it wasn't a puddle. But anyway, so actually that moment is important and I almost didn't even catch it. That moment, I was trained by my mom. It took me a little bit to get that, but to not bring stuff up. My daughter saw it. My daughter told me, and I did the exact same thing my mom did to me. And I didn't even realize I did it in the moment. What we were doing is trying to make it go away, to not bring it up, because if I would have brought it up to my dad, if my dad was there, he would have flipped out. So I didn't say anything to the plumbers when they were there. I would have caused a lot less damage to my upstairs floor, but I couldn't find where the water was coming from. The spot on the floor was. I couldn't. I looked. I touched the upstairs floor. I looked everywhere. I touched the wall. There was no water coming down that I could see. It had just rained. So I thought maybe my whole house, I've never had water problems ever in my house. So I thought maybe the cement just got wet. I have no idea. I can't find where it's coming from. But I should have told the plumber, and I didn't, because I was trained not to. That's where number 1 happened. Number 2 happened when I did find the leak, and I didn't even think about calling the plumbers, because the plumber told me that I was supposed to change that line. My refrigerator is huge, and when it's touching the wall, I can't get it out. There is no way I can get it out. I can't move it. So to expect a client or a customer to move their refrigerator, I don't know. I still think something in there is a little shifty, honestly, but it's asking for other issues. But I figure if people want to have that, see, I also grew up with my father being paranoid. So when those things come up, I just ignore it. In the fact that I'm just like, if their energy was meant for malfeasance, I like that word. If that was their energy, then that energy is going to come back to them. I'm not going to entertain that. I'm going to believe the best and that it was just an accident overall. When the plumbers left, the day that they left, this was what usually happens when I level up, is I have some kind of physical reaction because my body has to adjust to the next level. This is what I'm learning. I'm going to make another video. If you want me to make another video about the physical adjustment to leveling up, comment below that you want a physical leveling up video. Comment below and I will make one. Otherwise, if I've already made one, by the time you watch this, it'll be in the description below. So the pivotal part, when I was going to take responsibility because I didn't change the line, but I had a neck issue, there was no way I was going to be able to move that refrigerator. And the amount of time that I had, there was no way. So in the past, I would have not been necessarily terrified, but the self-talk in my head wouldn't have been great. That I should have known, I should have heard it, I should have seen it, I should have noticed, I should have. I literally couldn't. I couldn't go to work. All I could do was lay down. So unhooking is reframing that narrative, that shoulda. There wasn't no way. There was no way I could have. There was no way. Unless I would have had a water alarm behind my fridge, which I bought now. But it was in the shouldas that I realized what was going on. I realized how I was trained to believe everything was my fault. Because from growing up, something just couldn't be an accident. It was always somebody else's fault. It couldn't just be an accident. Everybody else had to be on high alert. That's what we were trained to do. We had to be on high alert. Because if we weren't on high alert, it was our fault. I still believe in a professional setting, that little bitty thing that took all of 5 minutes for them to eventually fix, 5 minutes. To me, in a plumbing situation like that, an end-to-end policy should be in place. If you touch one end, you touch the other to make sure that from end to end, it's good to go. But that's just me. Hopefully this plumber will adopt that policy, but we don't know. In all of the shouldas, I realized because I took that compassion, I stopped and I had the compassion, and I've trained myself now to look for the compassion in those moments. There was no way that I could move the refrigerator by myself. I don't think I could have done it with my daughter in the physical condition I was in. There was no way for me to do it. I didn't hear any water dripping. I didn't hear any water spraying. I didn't see any water on the floor. So becoming emotionally regulated is my tip number 1 to get unhooked. Learning yourself, learning how to get emotionally regulated in all things. No one wants to see it raining in their basement. That's not great. First thing I thought of though is, so where in the house is this coming from? The only thing I could think of was a refrigerator. What's the first thing I gotta do? Shut off the water to the refrigerator and see if that stops it. It did. Then one thing at a time. Like before, I think also with everything being my fault, you want to make it go away quickly because then there's less yelling. That doesn't make space for healthy conflict resolution. When you're just trying to not cover it up. When you're trying to make the problem go away as fast as possible, it doesn't create space for anything. And it limits the ability to be able to communicate with other people effectively, to be able to resolve the issue. At first, there was another slight issue, but I have learned when people come into your house, things might get damaged accidentally or just in the process of doing something else. So it feels like you keep taking hits. As a homeowner, it just keeps feeling like you keep taking little hits. So that was a little hit. It was some tile. It's by the toilet. It's not really a big thing. A little glue and a little mortar and it'll be all better. It's going to take more energy to have somebody else professionally come out and do it. It just seems like a domino effect at that point. And I'm just like, some glue and mortar, I can do it myself in like half an hour. It's good to go. I don't know. That one part might take longer, but. So when this water thing happened, I cleaned it up. I dried it out. I got new paint because the wall got wet and the paint on the wall didn't want to stick to the wall no more when it was wet. So I got new paint. And I think at one point I had to also accept that it happened. I had to accept. Maybe that's another reason why we always got blamed. Because nobody could accept that it was an accident and accidents cost money to fix. And blaming other people or blaming it isn't going to make it go away. Treating other people like crap and yelling at them isn't going to make my floor not damaged. And trying to get everything out of somebody for an accident But I bet you right then and there when I said that accident, because the voice that went through my head was, well, that shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened. Or accidents shouldn't have happened. That accident shouldn't have happened. It did. Regardless, the policy, for whatever reason, is in place, whatever. Dwelling on it and blaming people isn't going to make the accident go away. Addressing each issue. So the paint came off. So now I got to get paint to fix that. And I have to get more glue for the baseboards because for some reason they were glued on. Glue doesn't stick so good when the wall's wet. But I had to take the baseboards off to dry the wall. So I got that all situated. And then I had the thought, well, you should probably check the ductwork because water was coming from the ductwork and my furnace. I don't want to set that sucker up and all of a sudden find out there's water damage to that. The plumbing company also has a heating and HVAC company. So they couldn't help me necessarily directly with the tile, but they could help me with the HVAC. So I sent them an email nicely stating that they need to change their policy with the ice maker. That policy is harmful to homeowners and cause damage. And then I requested that somebody come out for free and check my furnace and my vents. I wouldn't have been able to think that way if I would have been focused on they need to pay for this tile thing, they need to pay for my floor, they need to pay for that and the other thing. Floor needs to be, the kitchen floor needs to be resurfaced. It needs a good sanding and a good re-poly or whatever you want to call it. Actually behind the fridge looks better than, granted, the rest of the floor is not slightly warped, but the floor is old, so it's thick enough that it could be sanded and hopefully evened out. The whole thing. That feels better. They're willing to fix that. My furnace is fine. There was no water damage to my furnace and it was a return vent. So we are addressing that. We were in negotiation, but I wouldn't have been able to get there. I wouldn't have been able to get to the negotiation and just naively accept whatever's going to happen to my vent. Because I accepted that it was an accident. There was nothing I could have done with the information that I had and the time that I had it, besides maybe asking the plumber sooner when I saw that spot on the floor. That was my only option at that point. But some of the damage was already done because of that policy. That policy is what caused the whole issue to begin with. So by becoming emotionally regulated, that's unhooking number one. That is the key to unhooking. Is practicing self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, doing all those things every day until it is automatic. And let me tell you, living this way for so long, when you practice doing the self-compassion and saying things, I did the best with what I knew, saying those things to yourself internally and getting rid of all the should-haves. The next thing that is so important is, besides emotional regulation, learning that helps you to in learning that and getting good at that, you start to realize the things that you do want and the things that you do not want. For example, with the water damage to my floor, I don't want to have to deal with somebody coming in professionally and sanding it all out and then having to have the chemicals in my house to redo my floor. And then they're probably only going to pay for that section. So then it's just a lot of energy that I don't want to have to deal with. But I do want to prevent mold. That is important to me. And that's a hill I will die on. That's where I want to put my energy. Where do you want to put your energy? So learning the things that you do want and the things you don't want, and not necessarily assuming what the other person can give you, because the solution that they came up with, I didn't even know existed, but it's in line with my beliefs and values. I just gotta double check a couple things yet on it, but they gave me a decent solution that didn't involve duct cleaning, which is something else I didn't want. Just because you can get something for free or discounted, that's the other thing I had to get around and accept or let go of, that this pricey company shouldn't have this problem. You can go down a interesting energy path if you're shitting this company. This shouldn't have happened because they're so expensive. Why are they so expensive if they're going to have this happen? Once I let that go and use that as a jumping off point, not that they're a pricey company, at the fact that they are going to be able to communicate. And that was the other thing that I noticed, was the fact that when you're never allowed growing up with generational trauma, I have a playlist on generational trauma. When you grow up with generational trauma, at some point you give up trying to communicate. And if there's other layers like perfectionism or narcissism and all those other schisms, you just give up. You don't even know. At some point early on in childhood, you just gave up. You just know that trying to have a reasonable conversation with somebody in authority isn't going to end well for you. So you just give up and you don't even do it. But the more that I've been emotionally regulated, understanding what I do and don't want, and the energy behind it, what energy I want to entertain, it made me happier gluing that tile down. And that's a winter project. I'll just put some stuff in there real quick. Maybe if I can stick another tile, like a chunk of a tile or some extra tile. That kind of energy. It would bug me more having them put the tile in than if I could just glue it. Then it's done. Energy's done. Problem solved. So basically, setting boundaries would be a good classification for the third one. Just what you're willing to do. The guy that checked my HVAC is like, oh, duct cleaning would be great. And he's telling me all these holes they're going to punch in it and put patches on it. And I've heard different things that they're not going to get it all. No. To recap, so letting go of self-blame isn't about pretending it didn't hurt you. It's about recognizing whose responsibility the situation is. So for example, we'll say I took ownership of the floor. I don't want it farted around with. And they did take responsibility because it was leaking out of the return in the basement. So they took responsibility for that. I think it's so important, and especially in healthy conflict, to be able to, both sides, instead of me just hammering them that they were pricey and all this stuff happened like my dad would have done, would have hammered him and hammered him and hammered him and taken no responsibility for anything. He would have just hammered them for everything. The fact that they were too pricey, the fact that the floor got damaged, the fact that the water got in the vent, and the tile, would have done it all. And hammered and hammered and hammered. How is that helpful? The truth is, you deserve peace. You deserve relationships built on trust, not guilt. And you deserve to wake up each day without dragging around stories that were never yours to begin with. You're rewriting your future. Every time you take that moment to have self-compassion and say, no, there was nothing I could have done. I am vigilant about my refrigerator. So in the capacity that I had, there was no way for me to know. And I take that wetness on the floor as a reminder. Now, anytime I see something, that I need to say something. That's just a reminder. I do see things and I am allowed to say something. And other people will hear me. That stuff takes practice. So this time I didn't. And I also promised myself if my daughter said anything like she did this last time, that I would immediately, no matter what, if she brings something up that I had already noticed especially, I am immediately saying it out loud. I don't care who hears it. So I have learned so much from that leveling up. If this video hit home, subscribe, share it with a friend. Leave a comment. Tell me which one of these 3 unhooking strategies resonated the most with you. Or if you have a different method, I'd love to hear more. If you'd like to hear more of my generational trauma, I have a playlist right here. If you want to hear more about my self-coaching, click here.